Welcome to the 11 Warriors show for Thursday, May 30th, 2024. I'm Jason Priestis, Chris Lauderback, Ramsey Nasrallah. Got our summer schedule going, boys. Off last week, kind of showing up when there's stuff to talk about. And summer is peak grilling season for Midwestern and I guess in Ramsey's East Coast dads. What are your grilling secrets? You guys have anything that you can teach me?
Over the weekend, I used grill plates on the Barbie. So let those heat up. You get both the ambient sense of the coals, but then also the convenience of like a flat top grill. Did some smash burgers, onions, put the burger meat in a ball, smash into it. You double decker those with cheese in between.
That sounds amazing.
Talking about it, and I just had one.
That sounds so good. I'm happy you said smash burgers. That's something I like to grill because we all grew up eating these like store-bought patties, like even from the deli the butcher or whatever. They would be like, fat boys. And now it's like, I always wonder, I was like, man, these burgers are like way too big. Like, do they make smaller burgers like I normally get at McDonald's? And now you see like smash burgers are popular across the country. You can go and get them at Preston's and Columbus, a lot of places. So I'm kind of happy to see that we're getting thinner burgers because they always felt too big for the bun for me back in the day.
I don't mind too big for the bun.
It kind of overpowers me too, Jason. I don't need a gigantic, three-quarter pounder when I'm making a burger on the grill. We had some pork tenderloin. I like to cook tenderloin on the grill. I feel like that's hard to screw up. So I like it a little crunchy on the outside, but nice and tender on the inside. And yeah, those are kind of hard to screw up. So pork tenderloin is kind of a go-to around these parts.
If I'm throwing a pig on a grill, it's going to be on there for like 9 hours before it starts falling apart.
Right. I'll tell you what I do like, man. My father-in-law, like just baked beans, but he does them in a smoker. And I don't know what else he puts in there, but those things just be able to taste kind of like, that smoke and like char or what, I don't know, just like next level if you like beans at all, which I definitely do.
Baked beans will always remind me of that tweet where the guy's at Cars 2. He spills beans all over himself. I can't think about a bean without that tweet.
Man. Chris, I'm not a huge beans guy. I know that our British friends love them. But for him to be able to make baked beans amazing, like they're fine. Baked beans are fine. I don't hate them. Like I won't like pass on them. Like, yeah. They're just fine. They just exist.
I get it.
For him to be able to take them to the next level, that's quite the trick. So you're going to have to get the inside scoop on what he's doing and share it with everyone.
I think the last time I had baked beans was in Northam Park. And I might have been drinking a warm, stolen Miller Genuine Draft.
A stolen beer, huh?
Yeah, I was probably 16.
All right.
That's kind.
Absolutely. A little bit of other news on the kind of ties in with the baked beans stuff a little bit. Did you guys see this? North Korea, someone in North Korea, maybe the government or someone up there floated 260 basically crap-filled bags on balloons into South Korea. And I'm like, man, that's so petty. Like, because, it's just as equal chance of that being some random guy that lives by the border doing it, or the government just sanctioning it and say, we're gonna send some crap to South Korea. You don't know which one it is. You have no idea. If it happens here, it's like, oh, yeah, someone on the U.S.-Mexican border flew some crap at their neighbors. But, there, it's like, could have been the government, man. Have no idea.
I'm still trying to catch up. You segued from baked beans on Memorial Day weekend to North Korea sending shit balloons over the 37th parallel.
You don't see the tie-in, man? Baked beans to ship balloons? I mean, it's right there. It's right there, right?
That's so I've been to the border, the 37th parallel between, it's basically north of Seoul and DPRK, and there's no plumbing or houses there. It's all these trees and, infrastructure, like a friendship center, because they just talk about Korea. Mm-hmm. It's just a temporary disagreement that's lasted, 70 years. Yeah. And if you look across the border, it looks like a different climate. It's like a desert because they chop down all the trees and burn them for heat in the winter. Whereas just over the border, they have heat. So it's just like, if you look from above, it looks like completely, it's like sub-Saharan Africa bordering, Italy.
Yeah.
I've seen there are houses, they're fake houses. They have facades, so it looks like there are houses there, but if you go to one angle, you can see there's no actual house there. So I don't know who filled those balloons, but like, think about the work just to fill one.
Oh yeah,
200.
They're massive.
Man, that's commitment.
Those are family balloons, man. They were like, that was a team effort. They were definitely family balloons.
I just envision, like, the porta potties have the tube on the top, and that's how they suck it out. Like, just put a balloon on top of that. They must just turn it upside down.
You sound like
that's
you're yelling at yourself. This is like O.J. Simpson, If I Did It, by Chris Lauderback.
If I were to fill some balloons.
I will say, though, I was super impressed when you sent the link over, but I was less impressed as I read the story. Like, this isn't even the first time they've done this, really. In 2016, they did something similar, but it was mostly used toilet paper and cigarette butts.
That's amazing.
See, I love that. 4 balloons over there.
It's like a bar fight, basically. It's like a fraternity.
Yeah,
it's MIT and Harvard hazing each other across the border with artillery pointed at each other. I've seen rims. I've seen some photos of, like, I'm sure everyone has, like, the nighttime photos of Korea. North and south, and one's all lit up and one's got like 3 lights basically. It's tough stuff, man. But I don't think people are here to, we can do a Korean War episode later if we want to get deep, because it's fascinating. I really believe it is. But we're under 100 days until Ohio State football. And you can kind of feel some of the seasonal energy start to ramp up. Got a release the other day about all the off-season award lists and how they're going to trickle out their, whatever they are at this point in time, quarterfinalists or I guess nominee lists. Yeah. And kick times will be announced in the coming weeks. We got odds for a game already, a line for like a non-conference game. Usually get some Michigan games and that stuff early, but when the non-conference game odds start to come out, the lines for those, like Ohio State minus 50.5 in the opener against Akron. And my first thought was, man, that's a lot to cover. And then I looked at the SP Plus rankings, and Akron's 133rd. I'm like, okay, that may be not a lot to cover. So
maybe the worst team in football, right?
You guys like that line? Is that 50.5 feel safe?
You need 2 touchdowns a quarter, and then you think that Akron might leak a score in, and that's your 50.5. I'm not touching it. Chris?
I'm not a very successful gambler, I don't think, but spreads like that I just stay away from. I'm watching the Ohio State game regardless. I like to bet on games I feel good about or that will make it that much more enjoyable to watch. I'm enjoying that game the same amount whether I won a couple dollars or not, because those games really, I feel like we watch them. I don't want to say out of necessity, and definitely not a season opener because you want to watch it all. But if that's like game 4 and you've already got a good lay of the roster and you feel good about, you're kind of slogging through that last quarter unless you're a liar. So I'd probably stay away from 50.5.
It's like when all the dads at the start of the fourth quarter in Ohio are like, please, no injuries, just no injuries. Get everyone healthy off the field. Like there's like 10 canned dad responses, and that's one you go to.
It'll be a first barometer for if they start to play the depth, which has been really troublesome the last few years, where you're like third quarter, like, why is Mike Hall still playing? Like, why are like so many starters still in at the beginning of the fourth quarter? They're up by 24 points. I think that's what's going to be interesting about Akron. Do all 5 quarterbacks play? And what kind of snap counts are we reading on Love and Warriors on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it comes out for Labor Day weekend? That's the game within the game. That's what I'm interested in seeing. And there's
and then if you get one of those like Cooper starts where you beat a team 72-0 or something like that in that first game, everyone's like, all right, this is for real. But if you get one of those Tressel Hawaii battles or something, or Tressel didn't he beat Akron 20-3 one year or something like that? And you're like, I don't think Day will do that, but like a score like that for Day would be like 31-10 or something. You're like, all right, things are not perfect right now. And you're only beating Akron by 21. There's big problems here. So hoping to see the latter, but I'm sorry, the former. But you look at this schedule, man. 8 home games, 4 road games, no team in the SP Plus preseason top 80 until game 5 when they get Iowa, who's 22nd. So that's nice. And then you got, of course, the really, really, really big one. Game 6, you got to go to number 3 Oregon. And then heard streets a little bit that Penn State game on November 2nd might be another big noon game, which is like delights Ohio State fans every year. That word's not out yet. It's supposed to come out, but Penn State at noon. You think Penn State fans like Fox a lot right now? That was our secret weapon. They take it away from them every time Ohio State comes to town. It's like, I would be hot if I was a Penn State fan.
They need to be reminded that Ohio State has won more whiteout games than Penn State.
That's a good point. Bring it home.
Declare us as a rival. Maybe you'll have a better shot. I don't know.
Agree. If you look at who they have remaining with Ohio State off the table, if they're a big noon game, they have, I think, Oregon and Washington, or USC and Washington. So 2 teams that are body clocks are 3 hours behind, which is going to be a new yearly thing now, football season, in Illinois. And then their other choice is like Kent State. So one of those will be the whiteout game.
Do they never Do you think they would do a whiteout in a non-night game?
They did in 2000. Was it the game that Ohio State blew was like 27-9 and they lost. That was like the first inception of everyone to wear white. It started during day games and then they got smart about it. I don't know, man. I think they're going to be pretty good, but I can't name a receiver on that team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they couldn't name any last year either, right? They were bad in the wide receiving core last year, but I mean, SP Plus has them 7th. It's going to be a good team, good game.
You guys heard of Julian Fleming, right?
I couldn't name one receiver on the team.
Got us. That's it. He's interesting there, man. Like, because that's not a good core. He could be the man right away. Should be the man out there. I mean,
tells you what you need to know. No hate on him, but he's not a number one wide receiver on a great team. I mean,
no,
come on.
All the guys except for Caleb Downs have covered him in practice.
What's the ceiling for him as a wide receiver at Penn State this year?
He's a number one guy. He can go, number one guy. He could be over 500 yards or something like that, but they'll probably spread it around to a whole bunch of different guys because I don't think they have, a bunch of, they don't have like proven guys really.
No, I'll be interested in seeing if he can keep his shoulders attached to his body. That's a guy that just took so many. I loved what he did for Ohio State. The catch, the last drive in the second quarter of the Michigan game is still unbelievable. And that should have been a touchdown drive, or at least an attempt at a touchdown drive instead of a 52-yard field goal after a 39-second clock burn. But that was made possible by the catch he made. When that guy is on, he's a problem. And I hope he does well in just about all the games he plays at Penn State.
Yeah, likewise. I think often you'll see two guys like that come with a little extra too when they go against their old team. So hope it's not a problem. Looking back at the schedule. What's the toughest game on the schedule? Is it obvious? Is it the game at Oregon? Is that where you guys are?
The last one.
You're just poking the bear.
The last one until they get the temperature back on the right side of the whatever metaphor I'm trying to use here. Michigan is in their heads, even with Harbaugh gone. I'm sure he'll say something from LA during the football season about Day being on third base, even though they have their own third base coach there. Now, maybe they'll be on their 4th notice of allegations from the NCAA by then. It's been proven, like beyond the shadow of a doubt, that Ryan Day is Marty McFly. And if you call him chicken, he's going to freak out. You need him to become the Marty McFly in the 3rd Back to the Future this season so that he can, Chip's going to call plays. I'm going to install toughness, be the CEO, and we're going to put Michigan back in hell where it belongs.
Like the sound of that.
That's the toughest game he has to win, though, and I don't give a shit about Oregon.
Well, I mean, let's step back. If Michigan had only won 1 straight, not 3 straight, would you have the same answer? Because, I mean, objectively, Oregon should be a better team than Michigan next year. 1 game's on the road, 1 game's in Columbus. Like, I mean, I know where you're coming from because it's Michigan. I agree. But is that because of the 3 that it makes it the toughest game?
You said 1 or 3. If you lose 1, that means if it was just 1, then you would be insinuating Ohio State won the comeback in Columbus. They got their doors blown off in the second half. We know they knew every play Ohio State was calling, but they still got their doors blown off. I think Ohio State should be good enough to telegraph its plays and still be competitive, and they weren't competitive in those first 2 games. They were competitive last year. They played cowardly. They coached cowardly football, and Kyle McCord sucks. That was a 6-point gap. That was the difference.
Presumably, right? I think I hear what you're saying. I think, the toughest game is Michigan because of the mental hurdle that's there and potentially what the stakes will be at that time. So I think it's the toughest because toughest isn't just defined by roster matchup. I think if you say, like when Dave talks about a matchup game and you talk about roster, player for player, blow for blow, I think Oregon and Ohio State is a better on paper matchup. But when you think about the loser of that game still has everything to play for. The loser of the Ohio State Michigan game may still get in the playoff, but they probably won't win the Big Ten. They may not be in the Big Ten championship. I think there's going to be there's just more stakes in general because of when it's played. But then you think about what's happened the last handful of years, the last 3 years too. I think that's what puts it over the top as the toughest game for Ohio State because of all those things, right? But if you're just saying, hey, who's the most talented opponent that they will play, then I think you say Oregon. But if you say toughest, the way I would define it with all those intangibles this year, there's really only one answer, and it's Michigan.
Yeah, and they always say it's the hardest hitting game of the season too. So good point. You guys have You guys might have me thinking like that as well. Which game candidates for Ohio State might be night games?
I feel like there's not always a lot of good rhyme or reason, right, to those. But I mean, I just looking at like what could potentially be the matchups. I felt like, maybe Iowa or Nebraska could be really strong candidates. So you kind of ripped through what their SP plus was. At least they were, respectable programs. I feel like Ohio State, Nebraska has been at night a handful of times already in the past. So that's clearly, something that is out there.
It's going to be Nebraska.
So yeah, I would think Iowa or Nebraska.
They're not going to mess up the Oregon game by building up like unsustainable hype and energy for Iowa, and then before they fly across the country. I think they're going to get through the Oregon game, and to avoid the come down, they'll install the next game as the night game, and that's why it'll be Nebraska.
Makes sense. It's tough to do a night game in Oregon anyway, with this audience, because man, if you do like a 7 p.m. kickoff, even that's early for night, and then all of a sudden it's 10 here.
And that's a night, right? They're doing All Blacks, right?
The Oregon is doing All Blacks. Yeah, we got
to bring back the Cocaine Whites
for that game only. They got to have them lying around somewhere.
Even if they're the COVID ones from East Lansing that Larry Johnson coached. Ideally, the 93 ones that were just some of the crispiest uniforms you've ever seen. But black on white and Eugene would be great.
I love that idea. I think they should honestly, the funniest thing they could do would be to wear alternate uniforms for every game at Oregon only. Because that's like their thing, right? Like, yeah, we got those too, we got better players, and we also do this. I think that would be hilarious.
They both have the same uniform, sugar daddy. We could make it happen.
Pretty much. One of them gets a little bit more than we do, though. But Nebraska, I think I like Iowa. I think Iowa's a candidate. I know they do November night games now. They still shy away from them, so I don't see who knows, man. We'll think this, and they'll say, oh yeah, Purdue's a night game. All of a sudden, you're like, all right, it's November 9th, a night game against Purdue. Thank you for that. That's road trip
for this year, for this schedule.
This schedule. There's only 4, so you got a 25% chance.
Oregon or Wrigley Field, right? I mean, it's either Allison Stadium or Wrigley Field.
Which one do you like more?
I think the fact that I would be able to go to Allison in the future makes me say Wrigley, because you don't know how likely it is that, they would play in Wrigley again. So, having seen the Cubs there, having seen Fish there, I would like to see Ohio State football there. That would be a pretty sweet little trifecta.
It's the gristle in the Big West sandwich that gets them past Penn State. You get Purdue, Northwestern, and Indiana, with the middle one being in Wrigley. I think that's the one.
Yeah. I plan to go. I don't know that I would love to see a Michigan game there or a CFP game at Wrigley or a game that mattered. But I mean, assuming Northwestern's not going to be like a legitimate threat this year, I think that would be a lot of fun to to kind of take in that atmosphere, because you're gonna have seats. They're gonna probably suck. You're gonna be like 80 feet away from anything that looks like a normal football, and
but
there's
the novelty.
It's gonna look like the Cardinals are in town.
home game for the Cardinals. Yeah.
No, the novelty of it is it, bro. It's Wrigley Field, and like you said, it's not a game of they're all games of consequence, but Ohio State's going to win that game. So, yeah, to me, that's a good road trip anyway, because you know what to expect, or plenty of stuff to do in Chicago, and you get to see Wrigley Field, and by the way, it's going to be very, very low stress on top of it.
Yeah, that's by far. I was thinking about this the other day. The stadiums I've been in the most of my life. It's Ohio Stadium. The Mistake by the Lake, Kinnick, because I lived in Iowa for 5 years, but probably at the top by significant margin. Like, I lived in Chicago 12 years, and I had Cubs season tickets for like 4 of them.
80 home games a year, 81 a year.
I mean, you split them up. I was going to like 30 to 40.
Yeah.
But 30 to 40. How many years does it take to get to Ohio Stadium 30 to 40 times? I'm doing that every year.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, a whole lot. Yeah, it's cool. It's a neat old park. I think Ohio State fans will enjoy. I also lived in Chicago for a decade or so, and we do go to normal Northwestern games up there at their field. It's always fun to kind of like be snobbish and say, oh man, look at all these Ohioans that don't know how to work the L turnstiles. And then we're going to have that like at Addison and Grand and Chicago stops. The red line's and the brown lines are going to be a hot mess that weekend, but I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. It's my wife's birthday weekend. I got to convince her like that's what she wants.
Take her to the game, man. For you, honey.
Look what I got you.
Time for some quick hits, man. EA's College Football 25 is nigh. Available July 19th. Reviews are starting to come out. It looks like, some folks in the press got to go play the game. And I know yesterday there were a lot of reviews posted online, and 134 unique playbooks spanning 10 offensive styles. Like, each school sent in 1,000 photos. There's details like team-specific celebrations, traditions, pageantry. As a bonus, no helmet-to-helmet hits and targeting calls in the game. They said they felt like it would frustrate players. Like, you're right. Yeah, it would piss everyone off. Like, imagine you got some killer season going. One of your top dudes gets tossed for some arbitrary, digital targeting call. I don't think I could be madder about a video game, anything happening like that.
It's like MLB The Show 2025 having Angel Hernandez in it. Like, what are you doing?
It's all the calls.
I'll be the guy who disagrees and think it's a miss, because the greatest sports game ever made still is NHL 93.
Yeah.
Immortalized in Swingers. Used to be able to take Gretzky out. Used to be able to take out Roenick, Pat LaFontaine. Like, you could permanently injure dudes with the right hit. I think, they're now pros, guys.
Yeah.
Make it real.
At the blood and make Gretzky bleed into the EA college football.
That's right.
Matt Brown called it a love letter to college football fans. And, they've gone to great lengths to say it's not a Madden reskin. It's kind of built from the ground up. Throwing mechanics are a little different now. How interested, I know we're probably past our peak video game days, but I'm really interested to see some footage, some gameplay from the shoe. Brutus out there banging his chest after a touch. Are you guys similar to that?
You hit it. I mean, I'm not much of a gamer. I know Ramsey's interested to see the tight end blocker ratings, but I am interested to see the player ratings and how they might stack up with other guys in college football. But no, and I haven't played in my basement. I do have a PS2 somewhere, like in a plastic bin somewhere with Tiger Woods, 05 or whatever that we played a million hours on. But yeah, if I did, that's what I would play. But yeah, I'm interested to see it for people that I know are just dying to get their hands on it kind of thing, and no hate on them. But yeah, I just don't, I'm too old. I don't have enough time. Too old to play video games at this point.
I mean, we've seen how the sausage is made. This coming out 30 years ago would have been to cancel everything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
2 days, 2 weeks and do nothing but this. There was an older version of this. I mean, I get, I'm not diminishing the hype. Just we've lived too long and we've seen a lot of this before, and I'm excited about it. There was a version, I think 97, where they had, you couldn't use the names, right? So it was just the numbers. You're playing for Ohio State and the numbers. And there was an all century team that you could play for the Buckeyes. And the quarterback was number 10. All right. So that's either Rex Kern or Archleast and there was a 45 in the backfield. Knew who that was, but it was just so interesting seeing who the different people were, and the internet was sort of in its infancy, and I'm trying to figure out who are these dudes that are playing in the late 90s instead of David Boston, D. Miller, Michael Wiley, and I figured out I'm thrown to Dante Gluefingers Lavelli, Paul Warfield, and then the defensive numbers, just looking at that Jack Park book, trying to figure out who are these dudes, and God, they're good, and would they be good now? Video games are magical. I'm psyched for this to come out. I'm not going to be dazzled by the graphics. I'm going to be dazzled by the emotional piece that it invokes, because that's really what this is about. We have Marvel movies that show the impossible, and they're completely dead inside. Something like this is going to look just as good, and it's going to be about what it means to the people who are playing it. Yeah,
I'll sneak over to Jason's and play it. I know Jason, your son, I assume will get it, and therefore do awesome. If it was in my house, I would 1,000% play it. You'll get in there, right? And check it out.
Yeah. I mean, he's right in the EA Sports wheelhouse. He plays FIFA and NHL. And Chris, you got a son
mode with Bowling Green.
That's right. Chris, you got a son. You want to sharpen your skills because he's going to be challenging you here in a few years.
Oh, eventually. Yeah, he's 5 now. So I mean, Mario or whatever, I can stomp him out pretty easily. But
there you go. Show him the contra trick to get the 30 lives, right? Some old men tips. Is the honeymoon starting to end for Deion Sanders? And I know for some people, the honeymoon never even really started. There, people just didn't like him from the jump. I've always thought he was good for the sport because you need villains, you need heroes, you need all these things. You need guys that make it really. He's made it interesting. Latest news: Shiloh Sanders, his son, that's a safety, filed bankruptcy paperwork, and that surfaced. And it's not really a good look for the family. Stems from a $12 million judgment against him for assaulting a security guard in high school.
that Deion was the CEO of, right? I mean, it was his school.
Which is a cool touch.
Deion was apparently on the phone with that security guard telling him to take the phone out of his son's hand. His son was talking to his mom, and Deion didn't want him talking to his mom and told the security guard to take it, and it led to that altercation.
Unreal. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sustained severe and permanent injuries, including a broken neck, damage to his cervical spine, neurological injuries, irreversible incontinence. Like, not a fun time, man. He's kind of listing out everything that happened. Ido lost the judgment because he didn't go to court, so he automatically lost.
Supposedly didn't know that it was happening. Like,
yeah, that's incredible. I typically would want to know if someone has $12 million coming from me.
I think we're above this. We're untouchable. We'll pretend this doesn't happen. We'll be just fine.
It gets better, though, man. This guy supposedly didn't list any of his NIL earnings or compensation. And they're like, hey, we know you got paid for this. You got to put this in there. Last month or earlier in May, Deion is on Twitter, and his other son, Shador, clowning people, quote tweeting guys that transfer. Not a good few months for Deion after going 4-8 last season. Thoughts on the program? Do you want him to stay? Do you want him to flame out and get fired? What's your preferred outcome for the Deion Sanders experiment?
I think it's great. I mean, how much energy or thought have you invested in Colorado football since Michael Westbrook caught a touchdown in Ann Arbor? Yeah.
Are you thinking about it now, or are you just thinking about that clown? We didn't talk about their team. We just talked about him and his point, children.
I watched Colorado games last year when I probably wouldn't have.
I watched them. I hate watched them, hoping
I did too. I want to see him get beat on. I mean, that's why. But I wouldn't have previously.
He's single fan. Maybe a Dan Lanning fan, like when Lanning had his halftime speech and then throttled him. I'm like, I love this dude. This guy's great.
College football has forever been like propping up amateurism, and you couldn't celebrate you couldn't show any emotion or joy, even more so than like the NFL. And now we have a football program that is full heel. Like they're the professional wrestling college football program, and they built it out of something that Carl Durrell left in a heap. It was a rebuild before Deion got there. It'll be a rebuild afterwards. This is a television show, and it's a good show. Even if the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. People are hate watching him. That's good.
I believe
eyes count the same as the ones that are rooting for them.
And they've sold out for 2 years in a row. They've sold out all their season football tickets. They're doing things they weren't doing. And I'll hate watch. I'll tune in. And I think maybe 6 months ago he might have had better sentiment amongst neutral college football fans, or maybe more indifferent. But right now, like, the walls are kind of closing in. They're kind of seeing some of the behavior, and
it's pointing out something. They're doing a cautionary tale thing for the kids. Like, so they grew up in a house with a millionaire father, right? But they became, they got endowed on their own through their talent, and it's clear they don't have money managers or any managers or accountants. They've always had money, so just money on top of money. And this is one of those, like, this is so avoidable. Even if you still beat the hell out of the security guard and do the dumbass stuff that gets you in trouble, the judgment, the whole, like, you should go to court, you should cop a plea, you should figure out some sort of, all of that would have been much easier to do than what they're doing now. And I think if you're one of the majority kids who did not grow up in a house with a millionaire father, you're like, all right, when I get paid, I think that you take some of it and you protect the rest of it by putting the right people around you to make sure that when you step in shit, it doesn't end up in a balloon from North Korea flying over your house.
I agree. I don't know that that's a lesson they're going to catch anytime soon, unfortunately, nor Pops, but we'll be there to see see everything burn this year. I don't know, like, what he would have. 4-8 last year, like, maybe he goes 5-7, 6-6 this year. I don't think they're going to be a really good team. I mean, they claim to have a top 5 quarterback. I don't know if that's necessarily true. We'll wait and see how the season goes, but he's not going to get canned this year.
Wrestling, man. Nothing they say matters. It's just that they're saying it.
That's true. That's a good way to look at it.
I love watching him crash and burn for sure, but I still am just annoyed by how he was just anointed so early on, like with the game days and whatever, and people just gushing over him when he hadn't done jack shit but be an asshole. I mean, they've not done anything to garner all this attention. So yeah, I hope they continue to flame out. I've never liked Deion ever, ever, and his children are no better. But yeah, as fun it is to kind of watch the train wreck, I also hope it finally wrecks and he just goes away.
Speaking of wrecks, Alex Grinch is in Wisconsin these days. He's doing some media because of spring football and whatnot. And that's the guy who got fired at USC with 2 to play last season. Defense was bottom 15 and basically everything: points allowed, yards allowed, rush defense, plays of 10 plus, plays of 20 plus. Trojan surrendered program worst 34.4 points per game. And, he was awful at Oklahoma before that and Ohio State before that. And fans at each school try to warn the next one. There's probably USC fans calling Wisconsin fans right now. It's look, we're trying to tell you. And there's a phone game that's been played by 4 fan bases right now. But he's up there. Luke Fickell hired him. He's not the DC. He's going to coach safeties. He's saying he's not sure if, quote, there'd be anyone in the country with a bigger chip than what I have. And he's talking about the chip on his shoulder. My question to you guys is, how big is his chip, and will it help?
Can the chip play cover 2?
Get the chip, call the formations. I don't know, man. It's neat to say that stuff, and he always says the right stuff. He at USC, he says, the buck stop here. He stops here. I take accountability. He didn't shy away from taking blame, but he's the guy that's always so bad. And he's yeah, I'm bad. I know it. I'm trying to get it fixed. And it's just been for 6 years. While he's getting paid $800,000 a year to do that.
I don't think his problem was motivation or, intestinal fortitude. I think he's just a really bad coach. It's I'd say the same thing to Parker Fleming. It's like if Parker Fleming coached the whole defense instead of special teams. You just you were talking about watching Colorado. I would watch Pac-12 after dark when USC was playing. And as fun as Caleb Williams is and Lincoln Riley's offense, the real action was when their defense came on the field. You're there's a hole there in the. It's there's no one there.
No, they gave him 10 yards of play to Tulane. In the bowl game, had 10 yards of play on his defense. Tulane, 10 yards of play. What you're saying though is you're not. It's not a motivational thing. It's not an issue with this or that. It's just Alex, you're dumb and a bad coach, and that might be the case. But I don't know. I saw some win total projections from a sports book the other day, and they had Wisconsin at 6.5. And I'm man. I don't remember a Wisconsin team being that bad. 6.5 seemed low to anyone else. And then later on, I was they just hired Alex Grinch, man. I bet that's a 1.5 at least off that list.
And they inherited late stage Paul Chryst. We're trying to go 8-4 Wisconsin football. It's not what Barry Alvarez had in mind. It makes you think though, because Ohio State had Grinch and Mike Yurcich at the same time, and they won the Big Ten.
Yeah.
They also gave up 7 trillion points to Purdue. They won the Big Ten.
You guys have to read Grinch's bio on UW Badgers. I read it today and I read it this morning, and comedy. You're never going to write something and just, clown on a guy, obviously, but it literally, chronologically, it always goes through what somebody's done, this and that. It doesn't even mention 2023 at all. The numbers 2023 do not even appear in his bio. But then secondly, for 2022, it talks about how USC led the country in turnover margin. Okay. That they had 29 takeaways and this, that, and the other. That year, I looked it up. They were 93rd in scoring defense, 106th in total defense, 112th in pass defense, 127th in giving up plays of 30 yards or more. And again, you're not going to write that, but literally, you can't write number 1 in turnover margin for 2022. This bio is it's magical. You have to read.
That's amazing. You can make any bio. You can make anything look better. There's a movie that's really hard to find now called The Sure Thing that we've all probably seen because of our age, with John Cusack, and he's defending pork rinds in the movie. He's they get a bad rap for being unhealthy, and he looks at the bag. He's they've got 2% of the riboflavin that you need. How can you hate these things?
Riboflavin, the best. Yeah, I mean that SID that wrote that Grinch page at Wisconsin should win the Heisman this year for having to turn that into what he did.
He's on the watch list, the SID watch list.
Yeah, SID watch list. He's on the watch list for the Bednarik of sports information directors. Chris, I found out his USC and Oklahoma coach profile pages are still active. Does anyone at any school delete pages? It's not on the staff page. You have to do a direct search to get to them. Does anyone do anything around here? So, speaking of that, pretty wild. Last bit of big stuff to talk about this week is, basically the end of amateurism. No big deal. Just something that, I don't know, old guys like us thought we'd probably never see. I mean, things have happened really fast the last 5 to 7 years, and it feels okay, now it makes sense that we got here. But go back to 1998 and tell your 23, 24, 25-year-old self that, amateurism is going to be dead. There's going to be a $20 million salary cap coming to college sports, and you'd laugh at someone. But that's exactly what's happening. Power 5 and NCAA voted last week to agree to a settlement to 3 antitrust cases, House versus NCAA, and 2 related cases. They're going to pay athletes for the first time in the 100-plus year history of college sports. Settlement is pending approval from the judge in the case, but seems like from all indications it's going to go through. Both sides have accepted it. Part of the settlement, they'll get $2.7 billion in damages to back players or current players. It only goes back to 2016, which is always kind of fun and arbitrary how they draw these lines, isn't it? Because that seems kind of relatively recent. There's guys like Mike Doss that played 20 years ago that created a ton of value, and he's 14 years too out of it, and then, that's over 10 years, they'll pay that out. And then each school has kind of agreed to share up to a $20 million per year with student athletes. And it's a cap, but don't call it a cap. Imagine, though, you're an AD at a school. How would you divide that, Chris, among your sports? If you're thinking you've got 20 million, I don't need the exact numbers. You can say 50% or 30%.
Yeah.
What would you try to do? Because Ohio State takes great pride in the fact that they have all of these varsity sports, and they enjoy the largesse of the athletic department.
Yeah, I read an article earlier this week that talked about how Ohio State was maybe more likely than others to not cut programs, but I talked about it a month ago on this show that, man, that would be my most... don't see how that doesn't happen down the line. That may not happen initially, but I don't know how you ultimately do it. But back to your question of that $20 million pie, I mean, if you're going to try to sustain 36 varsity sports, obviously not all the same size, don't generate the same expenses, certainly don't generate the same revenue. But you got to be football heavy, because football is what helps you continue to make money beyond what you've got to give back. So I don't know what that percentage ultimately looks like, but it's greater than 50%, obviously. I mean, you have to dump the bulk of your resources into what is giving you the best return, particularly if you're going to be out there. And I don't know that they've said it. I think they've said it a little bit of, hey, we intend to keep, they've inferred they're not trying to cut other sports. But gosh, I just don't even know how you answer some of that with understanding how Title IX truly plays into this question and that kind of thing. I think you can only really directionally say that you've got to put the bulk in football, especially at a school like Ohio State, because that's where your money is coming from. Yeah, men's basketball makes money at a lot of places and some here, but it's still obviously very lopsided to what football generates.
Is it like that meme for Kentucky, another school, where they have basketball and it's that button meme? It's like, where do I put the money? And they know maybe Kentucky basketball does make more money for them as an investment, but you're right, football is kind of where you want to drop the majority of that bucket.
It's happening at an interesting time. Jason, you mentioned, if you would have told ourselves in 1998 this was happening. I told myself in 1998 this was happening because the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit was in 1995, and they ruled in his favor that UCLA had capitalized off of his name, image, and likeness. It took 30 years from that point to this point. I think the timing is really interesting right now because of what we've seen with two women's sports in particular, with women's basketball, which is a better product than men's basketball right now. Not just for Caitlin Clark reasons. Caitlin Clark is not playing for the dynasty in that sport right now. And the dynasty in that sport right now is not in Connecticut. It's in South Carolina. And they're better than any women's basketball team I've ever seen. And also women's volleyball, which is very strong in the legacy Big Ten footprint. And I think that the Pac-12 schools coming on just strengthen it. Those are the two most invested sports outside of men's football and basketball on the Big Ten network. The amount of programming that goes into those two suggests that it's performing. And I have to disclose, I live in a house with a volleyball player. I have 3 daughters. We watch a hell of a lot of it. I watch it when they're not around. It's just really, this is now cresting. And it's happening at a time where there is more money. Football is going to get a lot of that investment, but I think in schools like Ohio State, they're pouring that money into football with the understanding that they're going to get a return, which means there's just going to be more money to distribute after that. And Chris's point about Title IX is correct. I think they're going to. I don't know if they're going to keep all 34 sports that the athletic department supports, but they're going to keep a lot of them. I mean, if you go to the bottom of the prestige ones, you get to a bunch of Ohio State national title winners. It's like pistol and fencing and synchronized swimming. You know who wins those? Ohio State does. I don't think they're ready to relinquish that.
No easy choices.
Title counts as much as a title.
Yeah. Yeah, no easy choices. And that brings up the question of how does this get paid for? Like Trev Alberts was just at SEC meetings and said, I thought an interesting quote. He said, college athletics does not have a revenue problem. It has an expense problem. And you look at some of these sports, and not just Ohio State, but a lot of major schools like Olympic sports, what we would typically call non-revenue sports, have director of operations now. They have coaching staffs that are large now. I think that some of that may get kind of pared down. Like I would be a little nervous if I was a director of operations for a men's volleyball program or maybe a wrestling program or something like that. Right.
That's what academia in general has.
Yeah.
I saw a quote the other day that American universities just need to get rid of the faculty and students if they want to really trim themselves up. Because all they do, they're just fundraisers and administrators. And it's the other stuff's just overhead.
And these days, hospitals, which you can still do without students. You just keep the hospital lights on.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So NIL in this scenario is going to, probably a lot of them are going to go in-house. The schools will take control of the NIL actives and manage those. And you've got your stars on the teams making a certain amount from the school as part of revenue sharing, but you're also going to be able to, in Columbus and some of these big markets, go out and get like endorsement deals on top of what they're getting paid because they're allowed to still take endorsements. And right. I've used the analogy of like LeBron going to the Lakers. I don't know how much he took advantage of this, but I remember people talked about how he might want to go to LA because there's more commercial opportunities and maybe entertainment opportunities out there than he would have in Cleveland or somewhere else. He's going to get the salary wherever he goes. But certain cities, you go to New York, you go to LA, you've got more opportunity for that. And thankfully for us, those massive cities don't, especially New York, doesn't really care a lot about college sports. So you have someone like Columbus that can probably punch above its weight here and hold its own. But it will be really, really, really interesting to me to see what happens in terms of how the pie is split, how many sports are kept. I do think, Chris, Ohio State's going to fight like heck to keep everything. I do.
I do too.
For at least a short while because it's such a point of pride for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think they want to get rid of those. I don't think they would take it lightly. I don't think they would immediately do anything drastic either, just over the long haul. We'll have to see. I do think the NIL conversation is another huge asterisk here besides Title IX is just, at one point in this whole discussion, like early on, I felt like people were saying, hey, does that mean NIL, goes away kind of thing? And I think what it does is puts it on steroids, brings it in-house, like you said. But if you can create NIL that can be a differentiator over top what your revenue share is, then maybe you're a little bit more comfortable on making it up, saying we're doing 48% of football instead of 51% because we know we can make it up in NIL money and we can use that other revenue to keep some of these other sports. And so if you have that other revenue stream that really isn't capped in a way that the revenue sharing will be at 22% or whatever they're throwing around right now of the revenue, which is where they're roughly coming up with that $20 or $22 million, assuming $100 million in rev, then yeah, I think you're talking about, hey, NIL could really be a huge difference maker here and could ultimately not just be a differentiator in football, but could it help you if you are Ohio State and you want to maintain, and not just maintain those sports, but like you said, Ramsey, like they don't want to just, keep pistol. They want to be national champions in pistol, right? So does that help, kind of swing that revenue share pendulum a little bit? Because you've got this NIL coffer that only a couple other, that tiny handful number of schools can compete with.
I think that it's not just sports related. They'll get industry involved. You were talking about, Jason, opportunities on the coasts. What are the big, who are the titans of industry in Columbus? It's B. Morgan Chase, it's Huntington, it's Cardinal, Worthington Industries, Kroger, all of the Wexner companies, Bath and Body Works. Like their talent pool graduates from main campus. Yeah. They have a vested interest in maintaining the trajectory of the university. And we now, we no one debates anymore that the athletic department is tethered to, the fortunes of the university as much as, winning grants and publishing research.
That's a great point.
Yeah, they're all in.
You named all those big companies. I'm a little disappointed you slept on waterbeds and stuff in terms of being a titan of Columbus
waterbeds
commerce.
And stuff and Big Lots and
Wild Man's Leather and Lace.
Donatos. Thank you.
Save us, Donatos. We need more 5 stars, please. Just some numbers to play with is, people listening and want to take away from the show. I think you need about probably $12 to $15 million to have a really elite football team. I think you need about $5 million to have a really elite basketball team. So
in 2024.
yeah,
What's that
yeah,
gonna
these
be
days.
in-
I mean, yeah. So I mean, you're almost already. You could have those two elite and then nothing else, or you could have like an elite football and a really really good basketball, and then maybe some other good sports. You're right, Chris. Good point about the NIL coming in and maybe helping out here, because if you're able to say, hey, we've got brand deals with all the businesses that Ramsey just mentioned in town waiting for you once you're here, then maybe you can have guys. Except, and what about this? Football staffs are going to have to hire like the guys that are on NFL staffs that do payroll. I mean, you're going to have comptrollers and accounting people on football staffs, or maybe, I don't know what those roles are called or what they look like, but something that some guys will have some data chops and can manage this stuff, because pro franchises absolutely have guys that just work those numbers all the time trying to make that stuff work, especially the sports with caps.
But do they have to? I mean, the NCAA is toothless. It would be the IRS getting involved.
Well, I think they have to come. They got to come out of this with something, some kind of like, and maybe we'll get there still. But they got to have some teeth. Something.
We just don't know what it looks like. You're going to find like, oh, why is Purdue getting investigated? Oh, they're in the football team on QuickBooks. It's a student project.
Yeah. Which team will be the first one to violate the cap, and why will it be Kansas? I mean, like someone's gonna the SEC. You think Auburn's gonna play by cap rules? Allegedly, I don't want to defame Auburn and say false things about them on the air, but maybe, right?
It's funny because programs like Auburn and Clemson are the ones that are eating the most shit because the competitive advantage that they did sort of in the shadows. So now everyone's allowed to do it.
Isn't that great?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
They're going to go back to being. I don't want to say on the show.
Yeah,
you go
they
back
don't have
to
the
being what
weapon.
I call them when I've had a few.
Yeah, we'll do a show when you've had a few. We'll get that out, because like they don't. You're right, man. That's a great point. They don't have their secret weapon anymore. Like bags of cash. Like that was it. And now like, I can go to Ohio State and get that same money and have a way better and more successful career with more opportunities after I graduate. No brainer.
Yeah, who's going to lose is that church on Clemson's campus no longer has to launder money for their recruits. It's going to have to go through banks now.
And there's that beautiful rite of passage every year where like one or two guys on the team never heard of 1099s before, and that first tax season rolls around, they're like, shit. So hopefully the word trickles down in the locker room. They hey, you better save some money for taxes because it's out there.
They got to move around the transfer windows to accommodate April 15th. You got to file before you take your NIL somewhere else.
I need another check. I got to tell them I'm staying. Last bit this week, man. Lost a great one on May 27th. The great Bill Walton passed away at 71. Legendary dude. I know we're all fans of the guy, but like, goodness, man, like you talk about guys that are people that live life to the fullest. And people say that at a lot of funerals, and a lot of people do have amazing, awesome lives, but like, top what he's done. Like, there's so many things he's done that we don't know about that are probably incredible. Like some of those tours he went on and seeing music and traveling out of the country. I bet there's like volumes of books that could have been written about some of the wild and crazy times he's had. A guy that wasn't afraid to try anything. I saw the guy eat a birthday cake with a burning candle on the air. I mean, like, he would do anything. And like the guy that does that is a guy that will do some stuff if he's vacationing in Cambodia too. Like he's up for anything, right? Like Bill Walton will try anything. And, man, selfishly, I wanted him to kind of come along and be a broadcaster in the new Big Ten with those 4 West Coast teams. And I was like looking forward to that because it was always surreal. Those are entertaining games. I mean, if it's a blowout, there's a 20-point lead. Like, you're going to be entertained. Like, Walton's going to tell some stories. What about favorite Bill Walton moment? You guys, anything coming to mind?
I know Christmas will be related to the Grateful Dead.
No, I don't know. No, I think I grew up a Celtics fan. My dad loved Larry Bird, loved the Celtics, and loved Bill Walton when he came to the Celtics, and even before that, I guess. But certainly when he got to the Celtics, and I remember I was only like 13, but I remember the '86 championship season, a 6-man, like just there's a picture of him running down the court with his arms in the air after he wins what was his second title because he got one with the Blazers. But I just always Larry Bird was like my idol back then, and when the way he talked about Walton was he was a great dude, loved his basketball IQ and all those kinds of things. So I was always a Walton guy. But what I would say, Ramsey, not even so much Grateful Dead, but that for me, I've often said, like, watching live music, like whatever your favorite band is, it's all subjective, but doing that with people that you love or care about, your friends or whatever, to me is like the ultimate celebration of life. And clearly that's how he rolled. He has said, like, basketball, whatever, winning all that stuff was great, but nothing beat watching like live music for him. So I always appreciated about that, that about him. And then, like you said, Jason, just his zest for life. Like if everyone, not everybody has the means to do all those things he did, but like search out the good in everything and try to make, very good, makes bad situations good. He was booed at first, right? When he went to Portland, he had bad foot and couldn't play. And there was a lot of drama and angst around that. And he ended up winning those guys over. Like people thought he was getting paid and he just didn't want to play. And that was never the case. Just the way he hung in there and won everybody over in the end. I don't know, just an awesome human. And yeah, it sucks he's gone.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by guys that are over 7 feet tall. Because of what that must be like. You are basically a circus freak growing up. Everyone's staring at you. It's assumed that you play basketball. I know a lot of tall people who don't, and it's like the first thing they have to say, no, never played basketball. I'm a scientist. Yeah, work with a few of them. Two of the great Renaissance men of the 1970s, 60s and 70s, played center at UCLA. And they are like wildly interesting. Like you hang on every word that they say with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, with Lou Alcindor, then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Bill Walton, and to pin a memory on the departed. It's you'd say that like all good comedy is born from tragedy. Like the funniest people are overcompensating for something that they grew up with, or an incident or something that occurred with them that shaped who they became, and they used humor to cope. When you see guys like Kareem or Shaq or Tim Duncan, who's insane in the best way, and Bill Walton, people who are guys that are 7 feet tall that are never comfortable physically because the world's not built for them, to see how someone like Walton became the most vulnerable version of himself with a microphone in front of him, and then also while playing basketball into his 70s, into his departure. That's the life well lived. I'll put a cap on all of it. Like he passed away the same week that Angel Hernandez retired from baseball. All people can talk about with Angel Hernandez is how the worst person who ever did the job is no longer anyone's problem. Whereas with Bill Walton, it's like you could fill a day with people choosing different moments, all of which deserve to be one of those wake moments that you talk about when you're saying goodbye to someone. So I'm glad that we were alive at the same time, because man, I don't give a shit about the Celtics, and I wasn't old enough to enjoy him with the Trailblazers. I was going to root for them because of the Trailblazers, but I'm glad that I was around for, when he played and when he broadcasted and when he just existed.
Yeah, awesome guy. Kind of fitting. I don't know, maybe not fitting that he kind of went out with the Pac-12, Pac-10.
He was not looking forward to the Pac-12 joining the Big Ten. He was very much against it.
Yeah, he was a big fan of the Conference of Champions and in the once great conference that it was. And so once again, thanks Larry Scott for basically screwing everything up. And then the Pac-12 Network aired their final broadcast just 2 days before Walton passed. So kind of like just kind of a weird tie-in. But
I never had that channel.
I was thinking my old dad. I've never seen anything on the Pac-12 Network in my entire life. Chris, have you?
I watched a game on
Land Grant. Channel. I don't even know if I have it. It's irrelevant.
I've seen the that's what it looks like. Yeah, it looks nice. I don't have it.
I've seen the SEC network. I've seen the ACC network. I don't think I've ever seen a single thing on broadcast on the Pac-12. Not even like a YouTube video, because like no one had it. Like it was like this like legend that people talked about. Like if you get it,
that's really what you want. If you're looking for distribution, you want to be a well-kept secret.
Right, that only like 1 out of 400 people get. Yeah, that's the key to distribution. You nailed that. But hey, we had a blast, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, it's 11 Warriors Show saying go Bucks.